Hello and welcome back, and today I want to talk about Rik Grimes and Shane. And did Rik actually become a worse person and a bigger villain than Shane ever was in The Walking Dead? Because I do believe there is a point in the story where Rik basically becomes Shane, and what I'm talking about is what Rik did in season 5. A lot of people do, when they talk about Shane, either say he was the first villain of The Walking Dead, or he was the most adapted person in the group, and he just adapted way too quickly to the apocalypse, and he was just ahead of everyone else, and people saw him as a villain, even though he was right. And I sit more in the Shane kinda was right, because Rik in season 4, 5, and 6 was very similar to Shane was in season 2, and maybe the only difference is that Shane felt remorse and all this guilt for killing Otis and it spiraled out of control. Rik killed many people within these seasons and didn't care. So Rik's definitely seeming like more of an antagonist at that point, just because Shane's feeling guilty for killing one guy to save Carl, and Rik's ending lives left, right, and centre and feels nothing. And it definitely comes to a head in season 5, I think, where they definitely use Jesse and Pete to be Rik's version of Shane's Rik and Laurie, and they have very similar storylines. You have Rik now in Shane's position with Jesse, and there is also that group dynamic which Shane had back in season 2, where Rik is now the adapted one, and everyone around him is basically pre-apocalypse still. And using this mini arc, we can see easily that Rik is quick to using violence against Pete, and even when Pete accidentally kills someone, Rik is there to straight up kill. Looking straight into season 6, episode 1, a man gets bit. What's Rik's first thing? Kill him quickly, move on. Rik is literally on a warpath, and he is destroying this community around him. And then when we compare this to Shane back in season 2, Shane was a lot more civil about everything. He might have had more personal ties to everybody, but even with the group, Shane, instead of being like, I'm gonna destroy everything, a lot like Rik was, he decided maybe it's best that he moves on. It's very different how these characters deal with these similar situations, and it really does show that Rik and Shane were really the same side of the coin. It's just Shane had those 2 months to get ready for the apocalypse. Rik's only been awake for about a week or two as soon as the Shane stuff happens. And I definitely do believe from season 4 onwards, Rik and Shane, if Shane was around, they would be identical. Shane would do exactly what Rik did, and it really does show, in my opinion, that Rik is just as bad as Shane, and season 2 was about Rik fighting his future, and that Rik definitely did do way more evil acts than Shane, and if you just look at their acts alone, Rik definitely does look like the bad guy, definitely with the massacre of the satellite in season 6, and him and Morgan going out to go kill all the saviors after promising to save them. And I do think if Shane was still around, he would have done the massacre at the satellite. However, the second act with Morgan, I don't think Shane would have done that. He might have killed them, but he wouldn't have stabbed them in the back and said, oh, we'll save you, and then fight with them, and then brutally murder them all. I think that's something that only Rik would have done. And it really does show that maybe Rik sometimes does cross lines that Shane might not. However, for the most of the time, they are exactly the same. Rik and Shane are just as bad as each other, and Shane really wasn't a villain. He was just ready way before everyone else. He was what Rik was meant to become. And that's just my thoughts, so please tell me down below. Do you think that Shane is worse than Rik, or do you think Rik is worse than Shane? I believe they are just as bad as each other, and both are very morally great characters that have some really dark tendencies that sometimes comes out and hurts a lot of people. But this is just my opinion, so thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you later.